The story, it turns out, is about clarity. But first, there was only the comfortable blur of rightness. Nadia and I found each other at a party neither of us ever intended to attend. Our friends, a collective force of benevolent guilt, had herded us both into the same crowded room. If anyone had dared to suggest that evening, as I plotted my escape route by the snack table and she lingered near the door, that we would spend the next 4 years inextricably linked, we both would have dismissed it with a laugh. Yet, there she was, a quiet figure who drifted over to my corner and, without preamble, began to gently ridicule the DJ's playlist. It wasn't a performance for the room, it was a conspiratorial whisper, as if we'd already forged some silent pact against bad music. We talked the entire night, an easy current flowing between us. We traded stories of terrible movies, bizarre childhood memories, and travel destinations that had failed spectacularly to live up to the hype. I remember her tale of a family vacation that spiraled into chaotic absurdity, delivered with such understated humor that I found myself genuinely breathless with laughter. By the time the party began to thin, I knew this wasn't just a fleeting conversation. I asked for her number before I left, and a few weeks later, we made it official. For the first couple of years, our life together simply worked. Nadia was sharp, quick-witted, always privy to the hidden joke. She possessed a rare attentiveness in conversation, a way of listening that made you feel as though your every word held genuine weight, not through performative effort, but through sincere presence. She remembered everything, not just the broad strokes of birthdays and anniversaries, but the subtle details, the name of a difficult coworker I'd mentioned once, the specific anxieties tied to a work project, even the exact dish I'd ordered the very first time we'd dined at a particular restaurant. It seems insignificant on paper, these small acts of memory, but over time, they build, weaving a tapestry that makes you feel profoundly known, not merely coexisting. Our lives aligned easily. We shared enough taste in movies to simplify weekend plans and preferred quiet nights into forced social outings. Our humor clicked, transforming silly moments into shared joy rather than exhausting obligations. Yet, there was also just enough friction to keep things interesting. Nadia didn't simply acquiesce, she pushed back when she disagreed, a quality I respected deeply. The entire relationship carried a low-drama equilibrium, a precious rarity I'd observed failing in so many others over the years. We even had our own peculiar ritual. When a bad week struck, we'd order the most terrible takeaway we could find, queue up the most objectively awful movie, and spend the night dissecting their flaws. It sounds absurd because it was, but it never failed to lighten the load, making low points feel manageable without demanding an elaborate emotional unpacking. I've found myself recalling that particular habit more than once since everything changed. The day-to-day, for a very long time, was simply good. This is the part that makes it so difficult to explain to outsiders, those who yearn for a clear antagonist. Nadia wasn't a bad person. She never treated me poorly. For the vast majority of those 4 years, our relationship was genuinely one of the most positive forces in my life. This context is crucial, because it made the idea of a proposal feel less like a gamble and more like an inevitable formality. And, consequently, it made the rejection sting with a depth I hadn't anticipated. Around our second anniversary, my thoughts about the future solidified. This wasn't the vague, abstract notion of someday we'll probably get married that couples often utter. I began to construct tangible plans. I started setting aside money for a ring, telling myself I'd wait until I felt financially stable enough to back up the gesture with a real plan. It felt responsible. I wanted to avoid the stress of venue searches immediately following a proposal. Nadia deserved a commitment with substance, not just a romantic moment. My confidence stemmed from our conversations. We'd spoken directly about marriage, not as a distant concept. She'd said, repeatedly, that she couldn't imagine a future with anyone else, that she wanted to build something lasting with me. So, when I finally began to plan the proposal after a year of careful saving and deliberation, I genuinely felt no anxiety about her answer. It seemed a given, a beautiful formality. I chose the beach where we'd had our first date, a place untainted by crowds or performative extravagance. That first date, we'd been broke, sharing a meager picnic on the sand until the chill forced us to leave. I wanted to return to that simple, honest beginning. I timed it for sunset, knowing Nadia's affection for that golden hour when the sky bled orange and pink. The weather conspired beautifully, a postcard evening that felt impossibly real. We walked along the shore, talking about nothing in particular. The ring, a weighty secret, rested in my jacket pocket, and I kept reminding myself, don't force it, let it happen. When the moment felt right, I stopped, took her hand, and spoke the words I'd held within me for 2 years. I told her of my certainty, of my desire to move beyond the almost phase of our lives. Then, I knelt. I presented the ring. She looked at me, a silent minute stretching into an eternity. Just looked. And then, I want to marry you, just not right now. I remained on one knee a fraction too long, my brain scrambling to process the words. I want to marry you, but not right now. I managed to smile, mumbled something like, yeah, okay, I get it, because I didn't know what else to do, and I refused to shatter the beautiful evening with a scene. She explained that she wasn't ready for the engagement stuff, that she needed more time, that it simply wasn't the right moment. She offered no further detail, no timeline, no genuine explanation, just those words, delivered with a look that conveyed both sincerity and an awareness that this was not what I'd hoped to hear. We spent the rest of the evening constructing a fragile pretense of normalcy. It was a lie. The drive home was a blur of frantic mental replays, every conversation we'd ever had about marriage dissected for a missed clue. Had I asked incorrectly? Was the timing wrong? Did I truly not know her as well as I believed? I said nothing, unwilling to appear as if I were pressuring her. I smiled, we ate dinner, and I told myself it was fine. That phrase, I want to marry you, just not right now, settled into the silent spaces of our lives like a persistent hum. It wasn't a rejection, not truly, but it wasn't a yes either. It was a pending request that lingered indefinitely. She had, for 2 years, told me she couldn't imagine anyone else. So either she meant it and truly wasn't ready, or she'd said what was necessary to keep me close without the intent to follow through. Both scenarios felt like problems. We never spoke of that night again. I waited for her to initiate the conversation, expecting some weeks later, a gentle clarification of what not right now truly implied. Was it a fear of commitment, a specific concern about me she hadn't voiced, an internal timeline I was unaware of? The conversation never came. And I, in my misguided attempt to respect her pace and avoid appearing unable to accept her answer, didn't push. We resumed our routines, trips, weekends with friends, the comfortable rhythms of a couple. On the surface, nothing had changed, but that unspoken question simmered beneath everything. Every engagement party we attended, every proposal scene in a movie, every parent's subtly probing inquiry about our future, each instance brought back that familiar, low-grade sting. I convinced myself she simply needed more time, that something would eventually click, and she would come to me when she was truly ready. For a while, I genuinely believed it. The relationship itself didn't deteriorate. This was what made that year so difficult to define. We weren't fighting more, she wasn't pulling away. By all external measures, we were fine. But there's a profound difference between a relationship that builds towards a future and one that merely runs on existing momentum. And around 6 or 7 months into that year, a quiet, insidious awareness began to form, a realization of which category we now belonged to. I didn't voice it, not even to myself. I simply carried on, constructing layers of explanations, stacking reasons why everything was still, somehow, okay. I remember a dinner with friends where one of the guys had just proposed. The table buzzed with details, the planning, her reaction. I watched Nadia's face. She smiled, appeared genuinely happy for them. Once, her gaze met mine, and I searched for meaning. Was she thinking of us? Was she uncomfortable? Or was it nothing at all? I didn't ask. I simply nodded along and steered the conversation elsewhere. That was the pattern of my year, reading unspoken cues, avoiding direct questions, and filling the silence with whatever interpretation offered the most comfort. I dwelled in my own head too much, as Joel, my closest friend, often reminded me. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she had panicked on the beach. Maybe the setting was wrong, and a different approach would yield a different outcome. I built an entire inventory of justifications for her throughout that year, clinging to whichever one offered the most solace on any given day. Looking back, those 12 months are perhaps the part of this story I am least proud of, not the proposals, not the breakup, but that year of quiet self-deception. By the year's end, I decided to try again. Her words lingered. She hadn't said no to marrying me, just not yet. Perhaps the problem was the setting. Too intimate, too quiet. Perhaps she needed something with more weight, a grander statement. I decided on the opposite approach. I booked a botanical garden, a place of sprawling stone fountains, rose arches, and delicate lights strung through hedges at night. Nadia adored plants. Our apartment overflowed with them, some of which I'd inadvertently killed by forgetting to water, a transgression she'd never quite forgiven. I reasoned that if any setting felt right to her, it would be this one. I recall making the online reservation while eating cereal at the kitchen counter. Behind me, her cat, with casual disregard, knocked a succulent from the windowsill for the third time that month. I just stood there, staring at the scattered soil, and thought, okay, sure. I enlisted our closest friends to help set up before we arrived. The plan was a quiet dinner nearby, just us, followed by a walk through the garden, a surprise she wouldn't see coming. Our friends delivered beautifully, roses lining the path, candles flickering, the whole setup radiating warmth and anticipation. It looked more impressive than I'd even imagined. Dinner flowed easily. We were relaxed, laughing, a good energy between us. I'd spent the day catastrophizing every potential pitfall, but sitting across from her, a calm settled over me. She was in excellent spirits. I focused on staying present, revealing nothing. After we ate, I suggested a walk through the garden. She readily agreed. We reached the fountain, and everything was exactly as planned. She instinctively grasped my arm when she saw the display, a gesture I took as a hopeful sign. I repeated my speech, telling her I loved her, that I was unequivocally certain that I'd been ready for a long time, and I wanted her to be too. I knelt, holding out the ring. She said, "Not just yet." I rose slowly, the air thick with unspoken words. "Why?" I asked, my voice even, though my frustration was barely contained this time. "What is actually stopping you?" She began to cry, a reaction I hadn't expected. She repeated the same phrases from the beach. She needed more time, she wanted to be sure things would work out, she just wasn't ready. I asked if there was someone else, not accusingly, but because her reasons simply didn't make sense after 4 years. She shook her head. No, there was nobody. Then, I asked the question I should have asked a year ago, on the beach. "Are you sure about me?" She looked down at her hands. She said nothing. For a year, I had rationalized her hesitation. It was about timing, the pressure of commitment, her need to arrive at her own terms. But watching her go utterly silent when asked if she was sure about me, that was an entirely different truth. This wasn't about timing or grand gestures. This was something she couldn't articulate. And the silence, in its crushing weight, articulated everything. We sat near the fountain, and I asked her, pleaded almost, to help me understand, because I had given everything I had, and I was utterly lost as to what more I could do. She said she loved me. She said she wanted to be with me. Then she added that she wasn't sure she was ready for the commitment of marriage and didn't want to rush into something she wasn't certain about. That was when it truly landed. She wasn't uncertain about marriage in the abstract. She was uncertain about me. These were two fundamentally different conversations, and for over a year, we had apparently been having the wrong one. I let the realization sink in, hoping for some miraculous reframe, some explanation that would make sense, that would offer a path forward. But there was nothing. She gazed at me, her face etched with genuine emotion, yet she could not answer the simplest question, "Are you sure about me?" That prolonged silence was the most honest thing she had said all night. I told her I couldn't continue. After 4 years and 2 sincere attempts, I wasn't going to remain in a relationship indefinitely, waiting for her to decide if I was worth committing to. Her tears intensified. "Fine, I'll marry you," she choked out. "Please don't leave." I knew, in that desperate moment, that she meant it. But she only said it because she believed I was walking away. That wasn't a yes, that was damage control, a ring clutched in fear. I didn't want her to marry me because she was afraid of losing me. I wanted her to want it, to be genuinely excited, not merely willing to agree to stop a perceived loss. These were irreconcilable differences, and I wouldn't pretend otherwise. I walked away from the garden. The days that followed were rough in a particular way. I stayed at Joel's apartment. He's the kind of friend who simply makes space, offers a soda, and puts on mindless television without demanding explanations. We played video games, watched dumb shows, and I tried to keep my thoughts from spiraling into darkness. It helped, more than I expected, to simply be somewhere unburdened by 4 years of shared life. The first night, sleep eluded me, not from anguish, but because my mind wouldn't quiet. I replayed the timeline, the beach, the year of silence, the garden. I searched for the precise moment I should have chosen differently. I found none. That's how I knew I'd made the right choice. When you genuinely mess something up, the moment of error is usually clear. Here, I kept arriving at the same conclusion. I had acted as someone does when they love deeply and wish to build a life. The outcome wasn't what I desired, but the decisions, overwhelmingly, were ones I would make again. Nadia and I weren't speaking. She remained in our apartment, I didn't go back. Then, the texts began to arrive. First from her friends, then her parents, then mutual acquaintances who had clearly received her version of events. He ended things because I wasn't ready to get married. Technically true, but missing about half the picture. I was labeled selfish, immature. One message lamented that I was throwing away a 4-year relationship over one small thing, apparently unaware that it was now 2 small things, preceded by a direct question to which I received only silence. Another accused me of being scared of commitment, a remarkable interpretation given I'd proposed twice in 13 months. Ashley's text, however, was the most revealing. "You were just a safe bet for her. She'll find someone better now." I didn't reply. It sat with me for a day, and then I realized it wasn't meant to wound me. It was meant to reframe Nadia's actions as a power move, not a fumble. And, reading between the lines, it quietly answered a question I'd been circling for a long time without wanting to land on it. My own friends were a different story. Joel was direct, she couldn't decide in 4 years, she wasn't going to. Matt was blunter, he thought I should have left after the beach. "The first proposal gave you everything you needed to know," he'd said. He wasn't wrong, but I hadn't been ready to hear it 12 months prior. I had desperately wanted to believe she merely needed more time, that patience would eventually lead her to me. It was a generous interpretation, and I clung to it far longer than I should have. Nadia's calls started coming. I answered eventually. She wanted to work it out, wanted me to come home. She admitted she'd been wrong to hesitate. I told her I heard her, but a yes that materialized only when she believed she was losing me wasn't the kind I was looking for. A long silence stretched between us. Then, we said our goodbyes. About 10 days after the botanical garden, a final text arrived from her. Short, devoid of drama. "I understand now. I'm sorry. I hope you find someone who makes you happy." No more calls, no more texts from her friends. Just silence. I went back to the apartment when I knew she wouldn't be there. I packed my belongings, left my key on the counter, and walked out. 40 minutes. For years distilled into 40 minutes and a key left behind. The first few weeks in my own place were an undeniable adjustment. I found a 1-bedroom in a decent part of town, unremarkable, but it was mine. I could leave dishes in the sink if I chose. I stayed up late watching films I'd long wanted to see. I slept in the exact middle of the bed, a small freedom until you realize how much personal space you subtly relinquish in a long-term relationship. What took longer than I anticipated was the mental recalibration. When your daily rhythm has been shaped by another person's schedule, their preferences, the very cadence of your evenings, suddenly having no one else to account for feels both liberating and profoundly disorienting. I'd often catch myself about to speak aloud, then remember I was alone in the room. Not in a sad way, just jarring. You grow accustomed to the texture of another person's presence, and then one day, it vanishes, leaving a quiet that resonates differently. The question that kept returning was what I actually wanted now. Not from a relationship, I wasn't even close to considering that. Just from my own life, my own days. I'd been so focused on the future we were supposedly building that I hadn't truly examined my individual desires for years. I started small. I tackled a list of deferred tasks. I committed to the gym with a consistency born of newfound time and a need for an outlet. My work rhythm became cleaner, more focused. None of it was revolutionary, just a slow regrounding. Joel checked in often. Matt and I began spending more time together than we had in years. The moments that truly caught me off guard weren't the obvious emotional ones, you brace for those, and they pass. It was the quiet, random moments. Opening the fridge and only having to consider what I wanted for dinner. Driving somewhere without needing to text my location. Waking up on a Saturday with a completely empty schedule and no one to negotiate with about filling it. Those felt alien longer than I expected, but eventually, they became my new normal. The thing about navigating such a profound ending is that, at some point, the processing stops being about the other person and shifts inward. It becomes about what you truly want. I'd been so tethered to a specific vision of the future that I hadn't truly examined its individual components in a long time. When I finally did, some pieces looked entirely different than I remembered. That realization, however painful its origin, was worth something. I also stopped explaining everything to everyone who asked. For the first month, every inquiry received a detailed recounting, the beach, the garden, the silence. Each retelling brought the fresh sting of it all back. Eventually, I simply started saying, "We broke up." It was the right call. And I left it there. It turns out that's enough for most people. And those who push for more detail don't actually need it, they're just curious. Shortening those conversations saved me immense energy. A few months later, Joel called, insisting we needed to get out. Just pool, sodas, a simple catch-up. I agreed. The night began easily. We shot pool, talked of trivial things, the effortless banter of old friends. My mind was blessedly clear of heavy thoughts. Then, about an hour in, Joel got a specific look on his face as I lined up a shot. "Hey," he said quietly, "Nadia's here." I froze for a second, then glanced over, feigning casual indifference. She was at the bar, leaning towards a man, both laughing easily. It looked comfortable, unburdened. I stood there, pool cue in hand, for perhaps 3 full seconds. Then I looked back at Joel, who watched me, poised as if ready to deploy a contingency plan. I shrugged. "Let's keep playing." And I meant it. Seeing her didn't shatter me in the way some part of me had braced for. There was something there, yes, not jealousy, but a low, quiet ache, the subtle recognition that something was genuinely, completely, irreversibly over. Not just on paper, but truly finished. We completed our game. I didn't look back at her again. When we finally called it a night, I went home, sat on my balcony with a soda, and simply let the entire evening settle over me. It wasn't heavy. I wasn't spiraling, not reconstructing timelines, not asking myself where it all went wrong. It was just done. And I was okay. There's a version of this story where that bar scene devastates me, where I spend weeks dissecting it. And honestly, 2 months earlier, I think it would have. The fact that it didn't told me more about where I truly stood than anything else had. You don't always get clean, dramatic closure. Usually, you just wake up one day and realize you no longer need it. I don't know if Nadia ever truly figured out what she was waiting for. Perhaps she did. Perhaps the man at the bar is precisely who she needed, and she'll know instantly with him. Or perhaps, 2 years from now, she'll still be not quite ready, and he will find himself in a familiar place. That is no longer my concern to track. What I know is that I didn't miss anything obvious. There were no traditional red flags. She wasn't dishonest. She wasn't pulling away or treating me poorly. She just couldn't answer one question: are you sure about me? And whatever the root of that uncertainty, fear, unspoken doubt, it was hers to own, not mine to fix. Some people might say I should have had more patience. But patience, at a certain point, ceases to be a virtue and becomes a form of avoidance. I reached that point somewhere between planning a second proposal and having an honest conversation about why the first one was turned down. I acted in a way that felt true to myself, and I would make most of those decisions again. What I wouldn't do again is spend a year pretending that silence was acceptable. What I know about myself now is that I am not someone's safe bet. I am not a placeholder, a backup plan, or a holding pattern until something better arrives. I will not wait indefinitely in a relationship, hoping someone eventually decides I am worth committing to. She had 4 years and 2 genuine, honest attempts to say yes. She didn't. The panicked yes she offered only when she thought I was walking away for good, that wasn't an answer. That was fear. And fear doesn't build anything lasting. I made the right call. It took time to feel that clarity, but I do. I'm still figuring out what comes next, but I am moving forward. And that, for now, is enough. After Nadia's initial "not right now" on the beach, what would have been the most courageous path forward for the narrator?